everyone, my name is Diane and welcome to So Here's What I've Been Thinking About. And this is our second session. And today we're going to talk about managing expectations of ourselves and managing expectations of other folks. So oftentimes expectations and reality get all muddled up and we're not sure which is which. Let's talk about what the definition of an expectation is. And that is a strong belief that something will happen or will be the case. And oftentimes we expect other people to understand what it is that our expectations are. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail today. So when you think about the expectations that you have of yourself as a leader, what might those be? What is it that you're really expecting yourself to do? And are those expectations realistic? There's a really fine balance between having high expectations, which often is what allows us to excel in the work we're doing, versus having realistic expectations. And oftentimes we don't reconcile the two. So our realities may be very different than our expectations. And to that I say, give yourself a break. Be clear about what you expect from yourself, but really perfection is not on the table. So just making sure that your expectations of yourself are realistic. The second thing we have are expectations of those we work with. So those may be team members, they may be people who report to us. And oftentimes we expect that folks will just go about and do the work in the same way that we would do it. And I would say that there are a couple of things that are really important when it comes to that. The first is to set your expectations for your team. If you can set your expectations, if you can be clear about why it is that you want to do something, why it is it's important to the team, why it is you want to be a high quality program that serves kids really well, why it is that you want to have the most efficient administrative department there ever was, why is it that whatever that goal is important. And setting those expectations is the first step to that. The second step to that is communicating those expectations. You cannot assume that people will just understand what you're thinking. And oftentimes what happens is we expect people to read our minds or to understand what it is that we're expecting without actually ever articulating that. And that becomes really important. So set your expectation and then communicate your expectation. The third pillar to that is about accountability. So how are you measuring whether the expectation is met or not? And oftentimes what happens is we set our expectations, we communicate our expectations, they're not met, and we don't do anything about that. So the accountability piece, the third layer of expectations, set, communicate, and be accountable, are all equally important things to consider when we're talking about expectations. Again, can't reinforce too much the importance of clarity and purpose and vision. If people don't understand where it is that you're going, why it is you're going there, what your expectations are around that, then really everybody's going to go off in different directions. So setting the expectations is really important. The second piece that's really important is open and honest communication. How is it that people are able to ask questions? How is it that you're able to have frank discussions about where you're going and what the expectations are? So again, creating an environment where it's encouraged to ask questions. People are encouraged to understand why it is that you're going about the work you're doing. Those are really important aspects. The next one is about repetition and consistency. So we can't just set an expectation once and expect that everybody will understand what it is. Staff change, circumstances change, conditions change. So it's really important that on a regular basis, everybody understands what the expectations of them are. Another way to look at things, this comes out of John Maxwell's mouth, and this is about expectations versus reality and what happens when people don't perform and how those frustrations start because there is an expectation and then there is a reality. And the reason that people don't perform, John says, are four. The first is they don't know what they're supposed to do. So you may have set an expectation, but they're just not really sure how it is that they're to carry out the work. And again, that often is why people don't perform. They don't understand what it is they're supposed to do. The second reason is that people don't know how to do whatever it is they're being asked to do. So let's say you have a group of overly rambunctious 10-year-old boys who you are trying to figure out activities for to make sure that the program goes well. And the staff member doesn't know what to do, and that's why they don't perform well. So how is it that you are making sure that they understand what to do? The third is they don't know why they should be doing something. And we see this all the time, where people are asked to do something without understanding why it is they're being asked to do it. And when that happens, the ownership, the buy-in to whatever the task is, becomes really, really difficult. So if you are somebody who is entering data into a computer system to record the number of families that you saw that day, and you don't understand what the end product is or what the why in that is, then that is really difficult to do. So making sure that people understand why it is they're doing things. And the fourth reason that people don't perform and the gap between expectations and reality is that there are obstacles beyond their control. And sometimes we can change those and sometimes we can't. So as an example, if there is some sort of obstacle or system getting in the way of somebody performing their work, it's our obligation as leaders to make sure that we clear that path as much as we can. So again, oftentimes, difference between expectations and reality and people not performing, they don't know what they're supposed to do, they don't know how to do it, they do not know why they should do it, or there are obstacles beyond their control. One of the things that happens when we don't set expectations, communicate expectations, and hold people accountable to expectations is we make assumptions. And we make assumptions all the time. What's an assumption? An assumption is something that is taken as a fact when there is no proof. And often it's a preconceived misconception about a situation, about a person, about a group, or a task. And it may well be based on past experiences or communications with others. And it is always dangerous to assume, and it is always a byproduct of a lack of clarity of expectations. So how do we avoid making assumptions? Number one, communicate and ask questions. If you are not clear about what the expectation is, whether you're leading and you need to get clear in your head, whether you're following somebody else's direction or working on a team, communicate and ask questions. Make sure you understand what the expectations are, and make sure you articulate what the expectations of others are. Because if that doesn't happen, you will be left with a variety of assumptions. Finding your voice to ask for what you want. Others have the right to say yes or no, and you always have the right to ask. And sometimes as leaders, we get defensive when somebody asks us, why are we doing this? Why is this important? And what's really important to remember is that we can't get defensive about that. What we have to be able to do is to create an environment where we can be clear about our expectations and where people are encouraged to do whatever it is they need to do to understand what that expectation is. We can't anticipate all of the questions, but we certainly can create an environment where it is not only encouraged, but expected that people will ask questions to understand our work. And if you don't know or you don't understand, then please, for goodness sakes, ask and be clear instead of making those assumptions. So, the last thing I want to talk about, just to wrap this up, is to talk about the one thing that you should always assume. The one thing you should always assume is that there is somebody in the group, in the team you are leading, in the team you are on, who does not understand. And it's our responsibility as leaders to, first of all, be clear and consistent with our setting of expectations and to make sure we communicate those in ways that are simple, succinct, clear, understandable, and again, invite an environment where it is not only okay, it is encouraged to ask questions. So there are a bunch of handouts to go with this particular session on managing expectations of self and others. I'd encourage you to read them. Thank you for listening today, and we'll talk to everybody again soon. Thank you.